You are looking at soap made from yesterday's bacon grease, and the process that turns kitchen scraps into bars like this is the same one your great-grandparents used in their own kitchens, with one ingredient so dangerous it can dissolve human flesh on contact. But here is the part nobody tells you. After 48 hours, not a single molecule of that chemical remains in the finished bar. And once you understand how that works, you will never look at a bar of soap the same way again. This is cold processed soap making, the way families made it for generations before factories took over. A simple chemical reaction that turns grease and lye into something that can clean anything. But lye is not like salt or flour. It is sodium hydroxide, and it does not care if you are a homesteader in 1902 or someone in a modern kitchen trying to save money. It will burn you the same way. The question that kept this practice alive for thousands of years is the same one most people get wrong today. How do you take a substance that can dissolve skin and end up with something safe enough to wash a newborn? The answer lives in 48 hours and one non-negotiable rule. For most of human history, soap was not something you bought. It was something you made from what the kitchen gave you. Bacon drippings, beef trimmings, the fat that rose to the top of the stew pot. Every household saved it. Every family knew what it was worth, because without it, you could not wash your clothes, your dishes, or your own skin. And the ingredient that turned those scraps into soap came from a bucket of ashes and rainwater. Lye. The word itself comes from the Old English, league meaning to wash. But the chemical inside, sodium hydroxide, was not identified until 1807 by Sir Humphrey Davy. Before that, people just knew it worked. They did not know why. They did not need to. The process was passed down the same way bread recipes were, mother to daughter, one generation to the next, until the factories arrived and suddenly nobody needed to save bacon grease anymore. But here's what the factories never told you. The soap they sold was not different in principle from what your great-grandmother stirred in a wooden bucket behind her house. It was the same chemistry, the same sodium hydroxide, the same reaction that had been discovered in ancient Mesopotamia 2,800 years before Christ, when someone boiled animal fat with ash water and watched it turn into something that could lift dirt off cloth. That reaction is called saponification, and it is the entire reason any of this works. The lye reacts with the fat molecules, breaking the chemical bonds that hold them together, then recombining into two completely new substances, soap and glycerin. The lye itself is consumed, destroyed, gone. After 48 hours, not a single caustic molecule remains. But before that, when the lye is still raw, when it has just been mixed with water and the temperature is climbing toward 200 degrees Fahrenheit, that is when you need to understand exactly what you are holding. Lye in its raw form is not just a chemical. It is a solvent that targets the very thing your body is made of. When sodium hydroxide touches skin, it does not just burn the surface the way an acid does. It triggers something called liquefactive necrosis. The lye reacts with the proteins and the fats in your tissue, breaking them down and converting the fats into soap. Right there on your own skin, saponification begins. That is why an alkaline burn is more destructive than an acid burn. The soap that forms allows the lye to keep penetrating deeper and deeper and deeper into the tissue. And you might not even feel it right away because the nerve endings are being destroyed as it goes. The first time I mixed lye myself, I was standing in a ventilated kitchen with goggles, gloves, long sleeves, and a digital thermometer clipped to the side of a stainless steel bowl. I had read every safety sheet and watched a dozen tutorials. The water was room temperature when I started. I measured exactly 119 grams of sodium hydroxide crystals into a glass measuring cup. Then I poured them, slowly, into the water, stirring with a silicone spatula, never the other way around. Within 30 seconds, the mixture turned cloudy. Within 90 seconds, the thermometer read 183 degrees. The fumes were invisible, but I could feel them in the back of my throat, even with the window open and a fan running. That is the moment I understood why the old soap makers always worked outside, why they kept a bucket of vinegar nearby to neutralize spills, and why they never, ever left a lye solution unattended, where a child or an animal could find it. The homesteaders of 100 years ago did not have safety data sheets. They did not have digital scales or heat-resistant gloves. What they had was deep, painful experience passed through generations. They knew that lye water could eat through a wooden bucket if the concentration was too strong. They knew that a splash in the eye meant blindness. They learned how to test the strength of lye by floating an egg or a potato in it. If it floated just right, the lye was ready. If it sank, the solution was too weak. If it bobbed too high, it would eat the fat too aggressively and leave pockets of unreacted lye inside the finished soap. And here is where the real danger hides. It is not the raw lye water splashing on your arm, though that is bad enough. It is what happens when you do not measure correctly, when you guess, when you use a recipe you found in a comment section that says, just use this much. Soap making is stoichiometry. It is a precise chemical equation. Every gram of fat requires an exact amount of sodium hydroxide to fully saponify. Too much lye, and the extra remains in the bar after the cure. You shower with it. You rub it on your skin. You wash your child with it. The bar looks fine, smells fine, lathers up, but every wash is a small chemical burn you cannot see until the redness appears hours later. Too little lye, and the soap is soft, greasy, and prone to spoilage because the unreacted fat goes rancid. But here is what the old recipe books rarely explained. The fat itself matters just as much as the lye. Beef, tallow, pig, lard, even the mixed grease from a Sunday roast. Each one has a different saponification value. That is the number that tells you exactly how much lye is needed to turn that specific fat into soap. Tallow from grass-fed beef is not identical to tallow from grain-fed beef. Lard from leaf fat around the kidneys saponifies differently than back fat. The Amish families who kept this tradition alive did not use calculators. They used a system of weights and measures and visual cues that accounted for these differences. They knew that a slow trace, the moment when the oils and lye water thicken into a pudding-like consistency, meant the fats were still reacting. They knew that a false trace could fool you into pouring too early, leaving a layer of oil at the bottom of the mold and a layer of caustic sludge at the top. And that brings me to the one non-negotiable rule that separates a safe bar of soap from a trip to the emergency room. It is the rule your great-grandmother never wrote down because everyone just knew it. It is the rule that modern tutorials sometimes skip. And in the next 60 seconds, if you remember nothing else, you will remember this. The non-negotiable rule is this: no bar of cold process soap touches human skin until it passes the ZAP test. And the ZAP test is the most brilliantly simple safety check ever invented. You touch the tip of your tongue to the surface of the cured bar. If you feel a sharp zing, like touching a 9-volt battery, that bar still contains active lye. Do not use it. Do not give it away. Do not even handle it without gloves. That tiny electric shock is sodium hydroxide ions, still floating free inside the soap, not yet bound to fat molecules. It is the exact same chemistry that causes liquefactive necrosis on a larger scale. Just in the smallest detectable dose your nervous system can perceive. If the bar tastes like nothing but clean soap, it is safe. If it zaps back on the curing rack, it goes. The Amish call it the tongue test. My great-grandmother called it the lick test. Same principle, same absolute reliability, because your tongue is more sensitive to sodium hydroxide than any pH strip you can buy at the hardware store. A strip might show a reading of 8 or 9 and leave you uncertain. Your tongue knows instantly, and it never lies. But here is what nobody tells you about the ZAP test. It only works if the soap has fully gelled, and that gel phase is where the real chemical war happens inside your mold. When you pour soap batter at trace, the mixture is still reacting. The lye is not evenly distributed yet. On a microscopic level, there are pockets of high alkalinity and pockets of untouched oil. Over the next 12 to 24 hours, the soap heats up from the inside. That is the exothermic saponification reaction, generating its own heat. In a properly insulated mold, the entire loaf will go through gel phase, a translucent state where the molecules reorganize and the remaining lye finds every last fatty acid to bond with. If the soap does not gel completely, you get something called partial gel, a ring of darker, harder soap in the center, surrounded by lighter, softer edges that may still contain unreacted lye. The ZAP test on the edge might fail while the center is fine, and a beginner testing only one spot will never know the difference until someone gets burned. Now here is the detail that reframes everything you have heard so far. Modern tutorials tell you to wait 4 weeks. They call it curing. They say it makes the bar harder and milder. That is true, but it is not the whole truth. They leave out the part that would scare you. The 4-week cure is a buffer, a safety margin designed to guarantee that even a poorly mixed batch has enough time for residual lye to find unreacted oil and finish the job. It masks the mistakes. It gives the chemistry time to self-correct. Your great-grandmother did not rely on a buffer. She relied on a perfect recipe and a thorough gel. She used the same weight of lye to the same weight of rendered lard every single time because she had tested that formula years ago on her own mother's kitchen table, and she cured her bars for 6 months, not 4 weeks, because she knew something that modern science has only recently proven. The longer the cure, the more the crystalline structure of the soap tightens, trapping any microscopic remnants of alkali inside a lattice that water cannot easily release. A 6-month bar does not just last longer in the shower. It releases less alkaline residue onto your skin per wash. It becomes safer with time, not just harder. But wait, it gets even more dangerous in the opposite direction. What happens when someone takes a shortcut in the other direction? When they want soap faster and read online that you can use a hot process, cook it on the stove, and use it the next day. That method works. The heat forces saponification to complete in hours instead of days. But high heat also accelerates something else, the breakdown of the fats themselves. Overheated tallow produces free fatty acids that can irritate skin and cause the bar to develop orange spots of rancidity within weeks. The old-timers never rushed it. They poured in the evening when the kitchen was cool. They wrapped the mold in a wool blanket and let it generate its own warmth. They did not poke it, check it, or rush it. They let the chemistry do what chemistry needed to do. And after 24 hours, when the loaf was firm but still warm, they faced the moment that separates a beautiful bar from a ruined batch. The knife had to be ready. The surface had to be measured. And the one thing you must never do in that moment was something every first-timer wants to do, by instinct. That is what I am about to walk you through. The moment comes 24 to 48 hours after the pour. The mold is still warm to the touch, but firm enough that when you press a finger into the surface, it springs back without leaving a dent. That is when you unmold, not before. If the loaf is still soft, you tear the edges. If you wait too long, the soap becomes so hard it can crack when you try to pull it free. Silas, an old soap maker I met in southern Ohio, told me his grandfather used a wooden mold lined with a piece of oiled muslin cloth. The cloth would peel back like a gift, unwrapping itself, and then the whole block, smooth and warm, would slide onto the cutting board. The instinct every first-timer has is to cut immediately. The loaf is finally solid. You have been waiting. You want to see the bars. Do not do it. The soap is still in a state called residual gel. The center might still be warmer than the outside. If you cut now, the friction and pressure will smear the structure. You will get ragged edges, crumbly corners, bars that look like crumbly cheese, not the dense blocks you see in a market. Silas taught me to tap the mold on the counter. If it sounded dull, the center was still soft. If it rang like a firm thud, it was ready to cut, but only if you held the wire taut and moved slow. He used a wire cutter, a single strand of guitar string, attached to two wooden handles. He would mark the loaf with a ruler every 1¼ inches. Then one clean stroke, straight down, no sawing. The wire passed through like it was slicing cold butter. The revealed surface was glassy, marbled faintly with the tiny air pockets that gave the bar character. Those bars were laid out on a wooden rack with half-inch gaps between them. Air had to circulate on all 6 sides. Every week he would turn them over by hand. 160 bars, every week, turned like pages in a book. That is the part the tutorials gloss over. The cure is not passive. It is active vigilance. At the end of 4 weeks, he would pick up a random bar from the middle of the rack, walk to the sink, and touch the tip of his tongue to the face of it. No sap. Then he would nod once and say, "They're ready." That was the entire quality control department. No lab tests, no pH strips, no certification. Just a man who had made soap for 40 years and trusted his own nerve endings. The surprising thing, the detail most people never learn, is what happens to that bar between month 1 and month 6. The saponification is long finished by then, but the water that was trapped inside the soap crystal lattice slowly evaporates. The bar shrinks by as much as 10% of its original weight. As it shrinks, the molecules pack tighter. The lather changes. It becomes denser, creamier, with smaller bubbles that clean more effectively than the loose foam of a young bar. A 6-month bar of pure tallow soap can outlast 2 commercial bars, and it never develops that sticky film that store-bought soap gets in the dish because commercial manufacturers strip out the glycerin to sell separately. In homemade soap, the glycerin stays. That is why your great-grandmother's soap left your hands soft, not dry. She wasn't selling the glycerin. She was giving it to you. Now, if you are standing in your kitchen with a jar of saved bacon grease, and you want to know exactly how to render it, what mold to use, and the exact ratio of lye for that specific fat, I put every step of that process into a single guide. The link is in the description. But beyond the recipe, there is one more skill your great-grandparents had that we have completely lost, and it is the reason their soap could wash a wound in the field without infection. That is what I am showing you next. Your great-grandmother's soap was not just clean, it was sterile. Before antibacterial ointments, before hydrogen peroxide in brown bottles. A bar of well-made lye soap was what you reached for when the plow slipped or the canning knife went too deep. The high pH environment that neutralized the lye during saponification also created a bar that bacteria cannot colonize. It was medicine and hygiene in the same brown block. That is the piece of knowledge we nearly lost when we traded the rendering pot for the supermarket aisle. But it is coming back, quietly, the same way the Amish kept it, not through nostalgia, but because once you hold a bar you made yourself from scraps you would have thrown away. You realize the old way was never primitive. It was complete. If you are the kind of person who wants every skill this channel covers in one place, I built something for you. The link is in the first pinned comment. If this content made sense to you, that is where you want to go next. Hit subscribe, not for the algorithm, but because the next video is the one I promised, and I keep my promises